Starting off with a Fox News alert here, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is leading a congressional delegation to see the conditions at our southern border firsthand today and get an update on the unaccompanied children coming to the border. However, one person is notably absent from the trip, Vice President Harris. Today marks her 45th straight day without a news conference on the border since taking on a leading role to deal with the crisis. But even with the Vice President MIA, the crisis is real. Border Patrol agents in South Texas arresting 180 migrants at 3 stash houses near the border. Customs and Border Protection says they came from Mexico, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Meanwhile, we are seeing the number of ICE deportations shrinking, down 20% from March to April, while the Department of Health and Human Services reports there were nearly 22,000 unaccompanied minors in its custody as of May 5th. Pete, this is on the heels, of course, of the president saying it's being managed and it's declined. But we all know those numbers are simply absorbed elsewhere in the system, not to mention the over 18,000 migrant children that have been put into the custody of people in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. Where is the vice president?
Well, she's not there. She's not going there anytime soon. She has shirked her responsibility from the very beginning. And of course, he goes down there now that they've emptied out those border facilities and, as you mentioned, spread them all around the country. This is not the numbers you mentioned don't even mention the amount of illegal crossings that have occurred that we can't account for because all of our time has been spent focusing on unaccompanied minors who are crossing. And now we're talking about potentially reuniting those, bringing the families from those countries to reunite with the minors. Talk about an incentive. Plus, deportations are at record lows. ICE feels like their hands are completely tied. If I'm the cartels, the only signal I'm seeing is business is good, not to mention the refugee cap being raised to 125,000. So all things considered, the only message is border is open. Kids are still my golden ticket. Families might be able to join them. And then they facilitate spreading those kids across the country just so the DHS secretary can go to the border and showcase his newly wide open facilities, the ones that they wouldn't let us see when they were packed.
And Kaylee, it appears that those in the White House are paralyzed while they try to discover, apparently for the first time, what the root causes are while ignoring all of the pull factors from this country. There's just silence in the wake. What about the rest of us that are waiting not only for an answer, for an addressing, for even just talking about this topic and being open to questions, let alone actually acting on it?
You know, Emily, I think it's more than just silence. What they are doing with the border, their communications, is an insult to the American people. They have shown that this is just not a serious endeavor for them. Kamala was asked, when are you visiting the border? She laughed. Jen Psaki was asked yesterday, when's Biden visiting the border? She said, oh, well, Americans don't care about immigration, so essentially he's not going. That's not a serious answer. And she went on to say that what we're seeing is cyclical. Fact check, false. It's not cyclical. In fact, there's a 20-year high of illegal immigrants coming to our border. And then you have Mayorkas going to an empty facility, the Donna facility, which the only reason it is empty is because the kids have been moved to HHS facilities, as we discussed yesterday, and it is an all-time record high in United States history that we have 25,000 unaccompanied children in federal custody. And what do? They laugh. They say numbers are coming down. They say it's cyclical, and they don't visit our border. So this is not serious for them, and it's an insult to the American people, and they're making a huge mistake because this is what helped President Trump get elected the first time. The border will be front and center in 2 years and in 4 years.
And Rachel, in the wake of this crisis, of this emergency, the majority of those children are now put into these emergency shelters, which, as we know, because they're so overflowing, because everyone is so overwhelmed, they have foregone background checks and fingerprinting of staff and volunteers. They also don't require licensing. They don't require the same policy conforming as the other shelters do, not to mention that it's more expensive at $775 per day per child. So what gets lost in all of that is the care of the children.
Absolutely. And by the way, look at those images. I mean, so much for, all the pandemic panic. We're in the middle of this pandemic, supposedly, and there's another variant in Brazil. And this is what we're seeing from the Biden administration, who will lock down our businesses. But you're right. This comes right back to the children. These children are being used as pawns for power and a voter drive by the Democrat Party. And that is exactly what's happened. When people go, why is this happening? That is why. We need to get to why it's happening. She is not coming because she knows what the plan is, and she doesn't want to have her fingerprints on it. Do you guys remember when Ted Cruz went to Cancun? When he was they said he was supposed to be in Texas during that emergency. And by the way, he was a federal legislator who couldn't do anything about it. This is Kamala Harris's job, and the media is giving her such a free pass, and the American people are seeing it, at least those who are watching our channel. I tell you, everybody else watching other channels are not seeing the images that we're seeing. They've moved on beyond this crisis a couple weeks ago on the other channels. But this is happening, and the children are the victims. Child trafficking remains a major problem, and they have their hands and their fingerprints on all of this distress and all of the things that are happening to these children. It is very, very sad.